Hello, I'm Stefan Greber. I'm the project leader for Linux containers. And for those who don't know, Linux containers has been the home for a number of container-related projects, most notably LXC, that's been around for well over a decade now as one of the main container runtimes, especially around system containers, but also projects like LXCFS, Distro Builder, and a number of others. It was also the home of LXD for quite a number of years until Canonical asked for LXD to be taken away from Linux containers and moved in-house as part of the Canonical organization. Now it's also the home of Incus. Incus is a fork of LXD that was created by Alex Hasarai, who was at the time one of the packagers for LXD for OpenSUSE. And the main reason for that fork was just that Canonical effectively fully took over control of LXD at that time, and the existing community maintainers, and there were like 3 or 4 of them at the time, were removed from the project, with only Canonical employees now having commit rights and any kind of control over the LXD project. So Alexa felt that it would be good to have, again, a fully community-run, more open, people from different companies type project to drive the development of something like LXD further. And that's what we ended up with Incus. After some discussion between Alexa and the other maintainers of Linux containers, which are, ironically enough, pretty much all of us are the former team behind LXD back when it was created at Canonical. None of us work for Canonical anymore, but the same people. So we decided that, yeah, it would be good to have Incus be part of Linux containers. And so a bit over 2 months ago, Incus was accepted and added to the Linux containers project, kind of going full circle with LXD leaving, but then Incus coming and taking its place and its all of the kind of resources and everything that we were providing to it. So again, Incus has now been part of the Linux containers project for a couple of months. During those 2 months, the focus has been on a lot of kind of cleaning up and really making Incus fit for development, fit for use. The goals remain effectively the same as with LXD. It is to make the best system container and virtual machine manager that we can, support clustering with up to like 100 or so machines within a cluster, and all of the kind of functionalities that someone would expect from any cloud environment, effectively. The goal with both LXD and now with Incus has been to provide what feels like a public cloud, but running on your own machine, making it very easy to use all of your normal kind of cloud native technologies, have all of those work as expected, but without actually having to foot the bill for like a full public cloud. And yeah, I think we effectively succeeded in that. Incus 0.1 is now out as of Friday, so like 3 days ago now. Not much has really changed compared to LXD in that release. Like feature-wise, it's effectively equivalent to LXD 5.18. But what we have changed has been, well, besides rebranding and renaming everything, what has changed is modernization of the code base in general. A lot of things have been moved around, a lot of things have been more aligned with what would be expected these days for a code base that's not almost 10 years old. And also been removing a number of features that have had seen extremely low adoption, are effectively deprecated but still kept around for backward compatibility, or are straight up like dependent on running on Ubuntu. One of the focus of Incus is to be like a proper open source project, see adoption across a variety of Linux distributions and platforms, and so we don't want to have any kind of lock-in on a thing that ties you to a specific distribution. Now, you can go look at the actual release announcement here. to kind of go into more details about what I mean there. So that's the announcement for Incus 0.1, and we can see that the changes kind of go into more details as to what's going on. The vast majority are effectively removal of features we don't want to carry into the future of Incus, and matching changes to things like APIs and the like. So, for example, with back when LXD was created, there was no such thing as virtual machine support. There was just containers. So all of the APIs and functions were all kind of named around containers. Then virtual machines were added, and so everything was renamed to instances to make up for that. But containers were kept around as far as like a naming and API and everything for backward compatibility everywhere, causing some amount of pain here and there. So that's all gone. Effectively now everything in Incus is instances, and that legacy layer is gone. There's some obvious things, as mentioned, just renaming from LXD to Incus. That means also renaming of the guest-facing API. So dev LXD is now dev Incus. Removal of legacy authentication methods. So using of the core of the trust password is now completely gone and unsupported in Incus, with one-time tokens being the only thing that's supported. It's been what's been generally recommended and really pushed forward in LXD over the past few releases, but with Incus we actually had the opportunity to completely remove the relatively unsafe trust password mechanism. More changes to the Go API, also removal of the container functions in favor of using the instance functions. And then we get into some CLI changes as well. So one thing that was annoying us for the longest time with LXD was the top level LXC snapshot and LXC restore commands, because it was then making it impossible to have sub commands snapshots related, since the top level snapshot command was already used. With Incus, we fixed that. It does break effectively every script that messes with snapshot, but because the command itself is completely different, that's fine. It's the right time to do this. So we now have an Incus snapshot subcommand that can create the list, rename, and restore snapshots, making it more in line with all of the other commands within the command line tool. Similarly, there was some weird backward compatibility logic that had to be done around generating trust tokens to not break some of the commands that could also take in things like client certificates through standard input, for example, in LXD. But with Incus, we managed to actually clean that stuff up by just splitting things into two commands. So now we've got Incus config trust add, which generates tokens, and Incus config trust add certificate, which deals with certificates. And that makes it possible to properly align all of the token related functions across the Incus client. So that makes it a lot nicer, a lot cleaner. And lastly, on the client side, one thing that has caused a lot of confusion, not just because of the naming being really confusing on the LXD side, but also because of dealing with two commands. So on the LXD side, you usually use the LXC command to interact with LXD. So LXC is the LXD client, except when you need to initialize LXD. For that, you need to use LXD init, or for some other commands like the SQL, cluster, recover, shutdown, and wait ready commands. So that's gone with Incus. With Incus, those kind of server administration commands are all within Incus admin now. So LXD init turns into Incus admin init, and the daemon binary is effectively never called by a user. It's usually actually now hidden away from them entirely outside of the path. So the only tool you ever use to interact with Incus is Incus, the Incus command, and that's it. So that's a lot cleaner, a lot easier, I think. There are a few changes to dependencies as well. So you may know that LXD uses a distributed version of SQLite called DQLite. The creator of DQLite has also left Canonical quite a while back and has now created a fork of it as well for similar reasons to why Incus was created. And that fork is called CharSQL. So Incus was naturally ported to using CarSQL instead of SQLite. No real change as far as feature and everything. It's also a fork, just a lot more of the focus on SQLite on the Canonical side was around trying to make it work for Kubernetes, which is a very different usage pattern than using it for LXD. In the case of CarSQL, its main optimization and its main design now is really on supporting Incus specifically, and our usage pattern going for pretty large clusters. So that should result in much better performance and testing that's a lot more relevant to what it is that we're doing. So that's pretty good. And then we get into full-on feature removal. So there are a few things there. The Ubuntu fan bridge support was completely removed because that's a feature that's exclusive to the Ubuntu kernel. It was never pushed for inclusion mainline and was never picked up by any other distro. So given that Incus supports Oven, which is mainline and is available in all other distros, it made sense to just remove the Ubuntu fan entirely. The next one is Ubuntu ShiftFS. So it's also an Ubuntu-specific kernel feature, which is now mostly redundant and is actually on its way out even in Ubuntu, because that's now been re-implemented much more cleanly through the VFS ID map shifting feature of recent Linux kernels. And so it made no sense to carry this forward into Incus when modern kernels don't need it anyways. So that's been removed. Then we get on to authentication and authorization. So on the authentication front, LXD supported Canonical Candid, which is a Macaroon-based authentication mechanism, a bit of a weird special snowflake that Canonical has as far as managing authentication, when the industry tends to be around more standard solutions like OpenID Connect. And LXD actually grew OpenID Connect support a few releases ago. And so with Incus, we just completely dropped Candid support and we'll only focus on OpenID Connect because that's what is actually industry standard. Authorization is in a similar situation where Canonical has something called Canonical RBAC, which is a paid product. So it's not even publicly available. And is completely dependent on Candid, which, as mentioned, is on its way out anyways. So it made no sense to support Canonical RBAC either, and therefore that entire layer is also gone from Incus. Now, the problem there is that Incus doesn't have a ready replacement yet. So if you need, if you are using Canonical RBAC and you do need to keep authorization control in that vein, you're going to have to stick to LXD until an alternative exists. The alternative is going to be OpenFGA. It's actually something that the LXD team at Canonical has been working on. So it was coming to LXD as well. And OpenFGA will play nice with OpenID Connect, providing both, well, that way having OpenID Connect provide authentication and OpenFGA providing authorization. So that's the goal, but it's not there yet. So again, if you actually are using Canonical RBAC right now, there is no real migration path to Incus at this moment, so you should stick to LXD. All right, the next thing that's been removed is the integration with Canonical Mass. That one is mostly because it never really worked well and it's not been used by anyone that I know of. So it's not about Canonical Mass consuming Incus instances. That part will still work fine, and that part actually makes sense. It's the other way around to an extent, where Incus would be able to talk to Mass to have Mass manage IP allocation on its behalf. Mass is not really a full IP address management tooling. There are actual good IPAM tools that will make a lot more sense to integrate with. And the fact that Mass effectively represents every single instance, every single container of a virtual machine in that case, as a device in its database causes a whole bunch of weirdness. Mostly because of the Mass data model being a bit too strict. The issues we run into specifically are that MAC addresses in Mass are expected to be globally unique. So not just unique per physical network segment or unique for whatever machines are currently actually connected and talking on the network, but just globally unique. That becomes a problem if you need to copy instances, because the copy will at least temporarily have the same MAC address as the source, which then breaks and just completely fails and prevents the copy. Something very similar happens with the name, where in Incus or LXD, you have the concept of projects. And each project can, by design, use the exact same instance name as other projects, because that's a way to actually segment things so that you may not even see the other projects. You may not even know what's in there. But even though Mass supports different domains, and so you would think you could map one domain per project, it also requires all instance names to be globally unique. So if you've got two projects with different users only seeing one of the two, now if someone creates foo in the first project and it shows up in the domain foo.example.net, and the other person wants to create an instance also called foo, but in their project bar, which uses bar.example.net, even though they are not the same domains, there shouldn't be any kind of conflict. Mass will not allow it. And that effectively actually creates some amount of data leakage, which is not great, but more specifically just prevents you from creating instances, so that's not great. As a result, since we've seen very, very little adoption of that feature, and it actually is actively conflicting with a lot of the newer features of Incus, we decided not to keep it and just drop Canonical Mass support. And the last thing, and I mentioned it earlier already, is the removal of trust passwords. So that was like an insecure, somewhat insecure mechanism to add clients. So the way that the trust password was working is that you would set the password to some value, and then any client could add themselves to the trust store, so add their certificate to the trust store, so long as they knew that password. It wasn't terrible, but the problem is if the password is guessable, then anyone can add themselves to the machine. And if they do that, they effectively own the whole server, so that's not great. And also, the idea was that in general the password would be unset after the different clients have been adding themselves, but very few people ever did that. So the one-time token mechanism that we have these days is far, far better than this. And so it makes sense to not even bother keeping this around with Incus. And the rest is mostly small details here and there around changes to DMI info and the virtual serial device markers. Again, that's kind of part of the whole rebranding and changing name everywhere, but that also affected those bits for virtual machines. Now, as far as migrating, there is a new tool that comes with Incus called LXD to Incus that you can run, and that supports a minimal version of LXD 4.0, maximal version of LXD 5.18, and supports effectively in-place data migration. So it will just make sure everything is fine. It will make sure that none of the features listed above are currently being used. And if it's all good, it will let you know that the instances are going to be shut down. Then they get moved to Incus and started back up. This should work pretty well in most cases, and will definitely get improve over time as we notice more edge cases. The documentation was updated, obviously. Quite a lot of changes needed there to make it fit for Incus. And I guess the last thing to kind of touch on from the announcement is that as an upstream project, so as Linux containers, we will not be providing packages for Incus. We just provide a git tag and release tarballs like most projects. And then it's onto packages, whether they work for a distro or they just work on their own, making their own repositories to actually make packages. Now, there are some links there for some of those that do exist. So myself, but not as Linux containers, but as my own self-employed company, I do make packages for both Debian and Ubuntu, and I'll actually use those in a demo in a tiny bit. So those are available, but we will also see native packages from a number of other distros show up over the next few days or few weeks. On the macOS side, I did do the similar publication through Homebrew as I was doing for LXD, so the package should be available there. And same thing for Windows through Chocolatey, but that one is still currently pending. And that's pretty much it for the announcement. If you want to test it for yourself, you can just click on the image or on the link and you get to the online demo, which makes it very easy to just try it. So you just goes through the terms of service, start it, and you get a terminal that you can then play with. You can just click on the instructions, and yeah, you get to interact with Incus 0.1 in just a few seconds online. Good, like, well, extremely low risk way to try Incus before you consider installing it on your own system. And just looking at the documentation, that's what it looks like now. We've done some amount of reorganization. It's also linking to the online demo, and then the getting started guide has the full kind of step-by-step on how to get everything going, and similar steps to what is part of the demo, but at that point you do it on your own machine. Now on the demo side, I'm gonna do two different things. First, a clean install on Debian 12. So just take a Debian 12 system, install Incus. There it works effectively. And the other one's going to be a slightly more tricky one, which is going to be taking an Ubuntu 2204 system with LXD installed and trying to migrate that over to Incus. So let's get to that. All right, so I actually have those two systems running here as virtual machines on Incus. So you can see the first one is Debian with one just running, and Ubuntu has a LXDBR0, so it is running containers on there. Well, containers and VMs actually. So let's go into the Debian system, and we'll see this is indeed Debian 12, so bookworm, and there's currently nothing running on this machine. So what I'm gonna do now is just follow the instructions on my package repo. So if we go to there, which is my package repository, there are some commands to actually get things going. This relies on curl, so we just need to make sure that curl is actually installed first. Here we go. And once we've got that, then this one is to install, to download the GPG key for the repository. And then this one adds the actual repo to the system, at which point we can just do package update. And then install Incus. We don't need recommands. If you install recommands, it just brings a bunch more stuff that you don't really need. And that should be fine. So just installing that. And here we go. And then I'm running as a root right now, but as a user, you need to add yourself to the Incus admin group to be able to control it. In this case, I'm going to run Incus admin init. And for anyone who ever used LXD, this is going to look very, very similar. So we're just going to use the defaults. There we go. And we're going to end up with probably a directory storage pool. Yep. And we've got network up and running. And we can go ahead and say Debian 12, container. I can do 2 CPUs, 2 gigs of RAM. Okay, and let's do the same thing as a virtual machine to just try both. So downloading the VM image this time. Okay, here we go. So container is running. We can go inside it and, play around. It's all fine. Memory limit and everything is in place. And the VM must still be starting up. Yep, there we go. We're in the virtual machine. So that's for a clean install on top of Debian 12. Now let's go look at the Ubuntu one. Okay, so this one does have LXD installed. You can see here LXD 518 with a container virtual machine, each with a snapshot. So pretty minimal setup, but still there's that in place. Now, same deal, I'm gonna need curl. Okay. And exact same deal, I'm gonna just use the instructions to get the stable repo in place. Okay. And now install Incus. Oops. That's what happens if you install the recommands. It's fine, but you can save yourself a few packages by not. Okay. All right. So now if I talk to Incus, obviously it's going to show nothing. LXD does have stuff running. So now you actually have a system that's got both LXD and Incus. And it's perfectly fine. You can actually initialize both and use them both in parallel. But chances are you actually want to move from one to the other. So you can run LXD to Incus. And this one actually goes to look at all of your configuration. So let's say I had a trust password set on LXD. Now it would just straight up fail and tell you server is using deprecated key core trust password. So it does do that validation. If you go and then unset any problematic key, then migration tool becomes happy. So we're going to say migration, yeah, go ahead. So then it's going to stop the source, stop the target, migrate the data, do some data mangling that's needed, and then start the target server back. And once it's started back up, it offers to remove the package, which I might as well do. So I'm going to do that. And now if we look, there's no more LXD installed on this machine. The LXC command no longer works, but Incus is there, and Incus sees both of them, both instances running with their snapshots, and everything is fine. So I can actually go, say, in the VM, and we're back up and running. So that's moving from LXD to Incus. All right. So that's pretty much it as far as Incus, installing it, running it, using the either Debian or Ubuntu packages, and what's new in this release. I guess just to wrap up, maybe some details on what to expect as far as support and the releases going forward. So Incus is going to be getting somewhat frequent releases over the next few months just kind of get things up and running, start adding new features, keep an eye on what's changing on the LXD side, and make sure we include those changes as well. The stable releases at this point are only supported until the next one comes out. So the expectation is that people roll from one release to the other. That's going to be the case until we do the first LTS for Incus, which is going to be most likely in March, April-ish next year, aligned with the LTS release of LXC and LXCFS. As far as support, there's the community forum and GitHub that are great for community support. A bunch of us watching both of them, so please come and go there. If you want commercial support, it's something that my company is very happy to provide, including things like data migration from LXD if you want that, feature development on Incus, and all of that kind of stuff. So you can find a link to Zably, my company, for that. If you want to just sponsor my open source work, that's also quite possible. Ideally through GitHub sponsors is the easiest way to do that, where you can do like either a one-time donation or a recurring monthly thing if you feel like it. And that's it. If you also want to contribute anything to Incus as far as code contributions, there are a bunch of issues currently open. Anyone is more than welcome to go and have a stab at any of those, and also go through the documentation, test that everything works, file bugs for anything that doesn't. It's a pretty large project. We think we've done a pretty good job for 0.1 release, but it's still an initial 0.1 release, so there's bound to be some rough edges, and we want to smooth those out as quickly as possible. So any help there would be greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you get to enjoy Incus 0.1, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.